Hello and what is up everyone, it is Hachi from the Art of Dota, and in this video I'm going to be showing you guys some ward spots for the new patch. Again, the map did change a little bit in the new patch, so as a result there's going to be some new wards that are possible. Now, the main thing that changed in the enemy jungle is that there's a shrine right smack dab in the middle of it, and you're going to want vision over the shrine because not only can you see low health enemy heroes heading to the shrine, it might allow your invoker to, land a good sunstrike. If you're Nature's Prophet, as I'm playing Nature's Prophet right now, you're going to be able to see a low health enemy, hit Nature's Wrath. Same thing with Zeus, global ultimates, IO with relocate, anything like that. So usually low health heroes are going to head to the shrine, and you're going to want vision over them because you might be able to cut them off or potentially get a kill with a global ability. In addition, you want vision over the shrine because it's right in the middle of the jungle, which means that if you're going for any ganks onto a farming hero like an anti-mage or SF trying to kill the jungle camps, you're going to want vision over the shrine because their teammates can potentially reinforce them through the shrine by TPing. So it's very important that you put a ward somewhere either here. These are my favorite ward spots, but you can really place it anywhere in this area that covers the shrine and you'll be good. But I like to place it either below or above the shrine here, or to the left or below, I mean, because it does give vision of this small camp here, and this ward also gives vision of the lane. But anywhere is good. You can place it right in the middle of the shrine. If you don't have control over the enemy jungle, you could even place a ward even further back here above the shrine, because this ward also gives vision of the rune, which is really nice early on. I say this is a pretty good ward for Dire. If you're playing Dire, an early game ward that doesn't really give vision of the safe lane area at all, but will give you vision of support rotations. I don't think it's the best ward to place at the start of the game, but maybe with the second pack of wards where you place around nighttime, this is a pretty good ward because you're going to be able to see heroes move towards the shrine, as I mentioned, and the shrine again doesn't come up until 5 minutes now, so this is an ideal ward to place around the 4-minute mark, right when the shrine active is up. Because potentially as an offlaner, let's say you are playing Nature's Prophet on the Dire, you might be able to see a low health support or multiple low health supports head back to try to use the shrine to heal up, and then you can cut them off with a TP and potentially secure yourself a kill. So I think this ward is really good. If you're a Dire, it's not bad as a defensive ward for Radiant either. But I do prefer these wards for Dire when you're looking to play more aggressive. A lot of times a hero will end up farming this camp, and you can catch vision of them and look for a kill. Now, let's move to the Dire Shrine here. So common ward spots for this Dire Shrine is right above the shrine here. This is a great ward not only because it gives you vision of this high ground here. A lot of heroes do hang around in this area as they're moving around the jungle. But it also, of course, gives vision of the shrine. You could slightly reposition this ward to be a little bit further left, so it actually gives you a little bit vision in the lane. I think this is a great ward as well. It might even be better. Or slightly to the right here, as it will give you slight vision over the tower. I think these wards are ideal if you want a little bit more information on what's going on in this top lane, and they're probably better if you've already taken down this tier 1, right? So if this tier 1 is down, this ward to the left here and this ward to the right is going to be slightly better because you're going to know that heroes are going to be hanging around in this area when the creep wave pushes all the way up. But they're not very useful if this tier 1 is still up, because it's pretty uncommon that a hero would just be randomly hanging out in this area or this area if this tier 1's alive. So this ward is better because it does give a little bit deeper vision, as you see. If you put it too far to the left, you're not going to be able to see over here. If you put it too far to the right, you're not going to be able to see over here. But if you put it right in the middle, you're going to have full vision over the shrine. Now, another common ward is right over here, to the right of the shrine. Again, it gives high ground vision over this area, which is really good, especially if this tier 1 is already down. But I do think that these wards can be placed if the tier 1 is still up and very early on in the game, because again, a lot of heroes are hanging out in this area, whether it's farming jungle camps or it's just heading to the shrine, again, as I mentioned in the bottom, Radiant Shrine, to go heal up. It will allow you to secure kills, potentially if you're a hero with a form of initiation or just a global hero. Now, these wards are pretty commonly dewarded, and same thing with all these wards here. let me get my sentry ready here, and I'll show you. So common sentry placement is just right on the shrine, and if you place a sentry right on the shrine, you're gonna be able to cover all of these wards. Same thing over here. So if you place a sentry right in the middle, somewhere near the shrine, you're gonna be able to cover most of these wards. It doesn't catch this one. So this one I would say is pretty good if you're trying really hard not to be dewarded, because this is a pretty common sentry placement. This is the sentry I would place if I'm trying to deward any vision near the shrine, because it covers the most popular wards, which is this one and this one, I would say, and anything in between as well. But this one to the far left doesn't get caught, and as well, this is a ward I've been really liking to place, and it's a ward that you can place from the low ground here, and you just walk up here and you can place a ward anywhere in this area. You gotta be a little bit careful because you can't just straight up click, right? If you straight up click, your hero will try to walk all the way around, so you have to walk right up next to the cliff, and then you can see the ward range here, and you just place it at the maximum range right next to this tree. And it's a lot better if you can also kill this tree, because of course you're gonna have vision over here now. So and that's pretty easy. You usually can just have a tango or whatever eat this tree if you are end up being in this area. Otherwise, you just have to deal with the vision being blocked a little bit. But with this ward here, not only can you place it from this low ground, so it's a great radiant ward, and usually when you're placing wards like this, you are going to be on radiant, and same thing with these, right? So these wards are for mostly dire team. These wards are for Radiant. Sometimes when you're playing Radiant, you're going to want vision over your shrine if the enemy has jungle control. So you want to see what you're TP into, because again, the shrine doesn't give you vision. But for the most part, these wards are reserved to dire, but it can be for either side depending on what position you are in the game. So this ward specifically is very good if you're on Radiant trying to have vision in the dire jungle. Not only does it give you vision of the jungle camp, as I said before, a lot of times heroes like to farm this camp, like SF, anything like that. You can find an easy pickoff onto them, but it also gives you vision of the shrine. A lot of times heroes like to TP onto the shrine and then walk to lane, right? Because if they want to reinforce their safe lane, they have two options. They can either TP to the tower or they can TP to the shrine, and a lot of times heroes choose to TP to the shrine. And with this ward, you're going to see any rotations moving in. This pretty much covered all the most popular ward spots on the shrine. Of course, you can place a ward anywhere near the shrine, but I think it is very important for you guys to consider warding next to these shrines. A lot more important than it was in the previous patch, where the shrine was right here and over here, because it wasn't in such a key area. Now the shrine is right in the middle of the enemy jungle, and heroes can also TP onto the shrine right in the middle of the jungle. So if you're looking to play aggressively at all on the enemy's side of the map, especially in their jungle, you're going to want vision over the shrine. Now, another common ward placement that will be popular in the new patch, I would say, in pro games, it's definitely becoming a thing, but in pubs, people are kind of catching on, but not quite. I still see a lot of people just warding, like, common spots next to rune and things like that, but it's vision over the bounty runes. So I'm going to start over here on these left two bounty runes. But of course, the most common spot is just right on top here. So you can have vision of the bounty rune. It also gives you vision on their tower. It's a great ward, but it's very commonly dewarded. Enemy heroes commonly check this spot to try to get rid of this ward. This is a really, really good ward. And don't get me wrong, this ward is very good if you can place it without being detected, and it will eventually be dewarded if it, nets you a kill or anything like that. But I would say it's worth it if you can get this ward up without being spotted and it stays up. But other wards that you can place that aren't easily as dewarded are wards somewhere over here. Again, this doesn't quite give you vision of the bounty rune, but it will give you vision of heroes walking to the bounty rune, and this is a ward you would place if you were on dire looking to play aggressively on the Radiant. And of course, if you cut this tree, it actually will give you some vision over the bounty rune. I placed it a little bit low there, but if you place it a little bit up, you actually will be able to see the bounty rune. So this is a very good ward. It's pretty undetectable, I would say. It's not very common at all, and I really like it. I'd rather place this ward a lot of times over this ward if I can actually get myself really deep into here. Again, it's a hard ward to place because it's very deep in enemy territory, but if you can get it off, it's usually undetected undewarded, and it gives you a lot of information. Not only does it give you vision of the rune, it also gives you full vision of the lane, so any hero walking up to the lane, you'll be able to see them coming. Now another common spot is of course right below the boundary rune over here, or somewhere over here. And these wards are great, but again, if the enemy supports are smart, they won't just place the sentry up here. Because if they place the sentry up here to deward this ward, it won't actually cover either of these wards. But a smart support will actually place the sentry here. If they have any way of giving the vision of the high ground, like the courier, they're going to just check the high ground with the courier, use this sentry, and it's also going to deward this and this. But again, it won't deward over here. So this is the most common sentry placement, either over here or just on top of the cliff. Again, it will cover all the wards, and these wards are really good wards, but they're very easy to deward. So that's why I recommend potentially placing this ward, as it's very hard to deward. It's going to stay up even if the supports are on top of their dewarding game. But again, place these wards by all means if you think they will help you out, even if they do eventually get dewarded. Usually the advantage that they give you, because they're such great wards, will net gain pretty much. And again, the reason why you want to ward near the boundary rune now is it's a very common spot for either offlaners or 4 position players, even sometimes 5 position supports, to go walk up to this boundary rune. Especially in the early game, the first 5 minutes, 8 minutes of the game, they're going to be walking to the boundary runes looking to pick them up, as it's just a free source of gold and experience. And the reason why you want the ward is if you're a hero like a Clockwork or any hero with catching capabilities, you're going to want to see the supports coming, and it's going to allow you to get some free kills. It's very good to have wards here. And let's move on to the dire side. Now on the dire side, there's a lot of wards you can place, as this is a pretty wide area, but of course the most common spot here is just right next to the cliff. You can even place a ward over to the right here. It's similar to this ward here, except you can't really place it from the low ground. I mean, you can try to place this ward here, but of course you're going to also need to cut these trees. And I can argue that this ward isn't even that bad. And I think that having Quelling Blade on a support is pretty baller, because it allows you to place wards that you normally couldn't place before. Either you place it on top of a current tree that was blocking it, or you put a ward that normally would be useless, like this ward right here, but then you can cut the trees to make it actually give you good vision. Now, with the common sentry placement being right near the boundary rune, right on top of the boundary rune, I've seen time and time again these wards be dewarded. I've been dewarded here. I've dewarded people's wards here, because again, this is a very popular spot. This spot, more so than over here, is a hot spot for wards, just because it's such a wide open area. A lot of times teams are going to play in this area on either side, so warding here is popular for both Radiant and Dire. Whether you want to play defensively, whether you want to play aggressively, you're going to place a ward somewhere near this boundary rune. It's a hot spot, and for sure in my pubs I've recognized that a lot of times I just place a sentry here and I'll catch a ward, or I'll place a ward here and it'll immediately get caught with a sentry. So if you want better vision that actually is not likely to be dewarded, you can place a ward somewhere over to the right here. So again, the most common sentry spot is right, or to the left, I mean, and again to the right or left. To the far right or left, it still gives you vision over the boundary rune. It gives you a little bit less vision, especially in the river, but it's a lot less likely to be dewarded, as usually when a support comes here to deward, they're going to expect a ward here, anywhere on top of the boundary rune, so they're going to place a sentry pretty much smack dab in the middle. And if they do that, it's going to miss this ward over here, and it's going to miss the ward to the right. And a better spot as well is potentially just over here. Again, this won't give you vision of the boundary rune fully. Again, it will give you a glimpse of it, but it will also give you vision of the lane. But again, this ward is pretty commonly dewarded. It's a bit of a variation, because it's not only a boundary rune ward, it's also this high ground ward, so you're going to be able to see supports coming. But again, this is a very great ward for if you're an offlaner. And again, for now, I think offlaners don't actually want to block the camps from the enemy supports. And the reason behind that is if you place a ward to block the enemy camp, it's going to be really obvious that there's a ward there. Whereas if you place a ward here, unless you're making like movements that really foretells that the ward is there, the support's not going to realize, and they're not going to buy a sentry, and they're not going to deward. But if they see their camp is not spawning, it's going to be super obvious them to buy a sentry and just place it and deward you. And now that wards give a lot of experience, you want to avoid getting dewarded early as much as possible, because if the supports end up killing your ward, they're going to get an experience boost that's going to allow them to hit that level 2, hit that level 3, which means that they're going to have more kill potential onto you, whether you're either the 4 position that's placing the ward or the offlaner. So you want to be able to avoid getting dewarded by placing sneakier wards in the early game. Again, it matters less later on in the game because the experience matters less, but very early on, 100 experience from killing a ward is a lot. It's half a level, and as a result, you want to be sneakier with your wards early on in the game. Now, that pretty much covers all the wards for these left bounty runes, and we'll head back to the bottom here for the right bounty runes, and I'm going to close off the video there, as these wards are pretty much the main wards you're going to be looking out for in the new patch, around this shrine and around the bounty rune. Of course, all the other wards still apply, you know, next to the runes and things like that, but nothing really changed too much there. But I would say the new terrain around the bounty rune areas, of course, with the bounty runes being moved and the shrines being moved, you're going to want to know the wards around them. So, first off, this bounty rune here, most common ward spot, of course, right here. But it actually isn't too common. I would say this spot is a lot more common. I've been dewarded here a lot more than I've been dewarded placing a ward here. The reason behind that is people tend to like to place a ward over here because it not only gives you high ground vision, but it also gives you vision of the rune, and it just seems like a better ward in general. And the reason why this ward doesn't seem so great is because this is just not as a wide open area, right? A lot of times people play in this area, a lot of fights happen in this area just because of how big and open it is. While if you look on the Radiant side, this is a lot smaller. So again, people prefer wards that will be on the high ground. So if you place this ward here, it's actually a lot less likely that you're going to be dewarded compared to the ward over here or the ward over here, because supports will commonly place a ward somewhere in their jungle here, because again, I did mention that this was a popular ward as well. Again, it covers the rune and it sees the shrine. So this is a common sentry placement, and over here, this is a very common sentry placement because this is a hotspot for wards, both for Radiant and Dire. So as a result, this ward tends to get ignored, even though if the enemy suspects at all that their camps are blocked, they will place a ward or a sentry somewhere over here and get this ward. But otherwise, you can actually get away with placing this ward just fine. But a ward that I think is a lot better than this ward, and why this ward, in my opinion, isn't very good, is a ward right here. And this is good for Radiant or Dire. And the reason why this ward is so good is because it not only gives you better vision of the river, it also gives you vision of the bounty rune. It covers high ground to high ground, and it also gives you vision of the rune. This is probably my favorite ward to place right now. Again, the ward up here might seem like it's better because it gives you vision of this bounty rune, but if you place it up here, it doesn't give you vision of this bounty rune. So it will still only give you vision of this high ground bounty rune, and it doesn't give you vision of the rune either. And a variation of this ward is a ward to the left here, but of course the vision is going to get obstructed a little bit because of these trees, but again, you can solve that with a quelling blade or tangos. And of course, this ward is very good as it will give you vision of the rune. It gives you vision of this high ground over here and the bounty rune. And this is probably the most common ward placement in this area to cover this bounty rune, and as a result is very commonly dewarded. You just place a sentry here, and also this sentry will cover this ward and this ward. So you got to keep that in mind, but I think this ward, especially in the early game, is great because it not only gives you pretty deep vision on this side, because it's still on a one-step high ground, but it also gives you vision of the bounty rune. This is my favorite ward to place in this area early on. Another very good ward here is this ward. Now this ward actually doesn't see the bounty rune because of this tree, but again, very easily solved with a quelling blade or tangos. As it's only one tree, it's actually not bad. You can place this ward very early on, and then when you need to use your tango, you just walk back to this tree, eat it, and then this ward will now give you vision of the bounty rune. And in addition, it also gives you vision of the rune. There's some overlap here with these wards covering the rune as well, but the main point is to give you guys an idea of good wards to see the bounty rune, as this is a very popular spot. So many times that a support will walk up here and pick up the bounty rune, and they're gonna do without even thinking. They're not thinking of, you know, potential wards. Are they being spotted? They're just walking up and they're seeing that free gold. They see that gold on the map and they want that golden experience. They're walking up, and if you see them coming, you can set up for a kill. It's very, very, very important to have wards over here, because this is what supports are doing. A lot of action is happening in the side lanes now compared to before, so you're gonna want very, very good vision over these rune spots. So again, place any of these wards that I said in this video, and you should be set for the early game. The shrine wards are for a little bit later in the game. I would say past the 10-minute mark, but the shrine wards, or the bounty rune wards, getting mixed up here. The bounty rune wards are very good early on, because that's what the support's going to be doing for the most part in the first 10 minutes, is walking up and picking up the bounty runes. But I'd say the bounty rune wards are good all game, especially the wards that also cover the rune, such as this one and this one right here. On Dire, you're not going to be able to place any wards that cover the rune and the bounty runes, so there's going to be no option for that there. But on the Radiant side, you're going to be able to place these wards here, and you're going to be able to see the rune, you're going to be able to see the high grounds, you're going to be able to see the bounty runes, and they're great wards in general. And I hope this video helped you out in terms of learning the new ward spots that were created in the new patch because of the terrain changes and the map changes, most specifically the shrine movement and the bounty rune movement. And now these wards are very good for covering this full area, and you can really get a decent idea of where the enemies are moving if you place these wards. I hope I covered some pretty good wards as well as alternatives in case you don't want to place the more common wards and get dewarded. And I'll see you all in the next video. Make sure you leave a like down below if this video helped you out, and also feel free to subscribe, as I'm uploading videos almost daily, but kind of every other day now, but I'll eventually get to a daily schedule. So stay tuned for more content. I know this is a longer video, but I tried to be informative as possible, as I'm a support player and I really like warding. So I'll see you all in the next one, and peace out.